Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, wondering if the placement of the camera versus the placement of the microphone means that my nose looks big when I do this. This is your host, Tony Cañas, who did not take his ADHD meds today. And today I have with me Michael Mensch, or actually your screen says Mike Mensch. Which one do you prefer?
Mike, it's good.
Perfect. So I have with me Mike Mensch, co-founder and CEO at Agency Brokerage Consultants. Mike, how's it going today?
Terrific.
Fantastic. So, according to LinkedIn, first of all, we're recording on July 11th. So July 11th, Thursday, July 11th. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, it has been in the 90s for like the last 3 weeks straight, to the point that I skate, like roller skate. I go skating with the sunrise because otherwise it gets too hot the rest of the day. So you are in Melbourne, Florida, right? And
Yes.
Melbourne is Tampa Bay side?
No, the other side of the state. So I'm near Kennedy Space Center, Cocoa Beach area.
Okay, cool. So I'm guessing that in July, you guys are roughly 100 degrees and 110% humidity,
Pretty
basically.
close. Yeah, pretty close.
And a hurricane every third day, kind of thing.
They're threatening. They are threatening out there.
Stay safe this season, right? It's looking dicey for sure. All right. So number one, I hope you had a great 4th of July holiday last weekend. And we always give the guest a chance to give the elevator pitch. What is Agency Brokerage Consultants? Which, by the way, I just realized the acronym would be ABC. So well done. What is Agency Brokerage Consultants?
We are a merger and acquisition advisor to independent agencies. So we do lots of valuations, but our main job is handling M&A transactions for clients that own an agency and are looking to sell or merge with a larger company.
Okay, that own an agency. Okay. So whenever we're talking agencies, I always give my standard Tony disclaimer, which is I am a carrier guy. I'm a former middle market underwriter who accidentally ended up being the mascot of the insurtech world. I have never worked at an agency, much less owned one, but I've been very tangential to the agency and brokerage space. So basically, I have served agencies as an underwriter, as a marketing rep, as a recruiter. I have so many friends that work in the agency space. So I've worked with agency owners in many ways, but I've never run one myself, right? So take everything I say with a grain of salt. Okay. So the whole time that I've been in insurance, which is going on 15 years, we have been seeing, especially in the last 5 to 10, this consolidation of agencies, right? There's something like 30,000 independent agents out there. Many of them are smaller, right? From mom and pop shops to like three principals and 2 account managers kind of thing. And then you have kind of the regional shops, and then you have like the alphabet shops, right? That are really big. And so 2 really interesting things I've noticed in your side of the game. Number one, as agency owners finally decide to retire, many of them, their kids don't want to take over the agency. And on the other side of that coin, even the big shops don't seem to be very good at training young producers. They seem to grow mostly by acquisition. So yeah, lots of activity in your space. So okay. So let's start from the perspective of the agency owners, which is I think mostly who you serve.
Sure.
So if I'm an agency principal, or a group of 3 or 4 principals that own this agency, and we've been running it for 20 to 50 years, and it's finally time. How does that even work? Like, is there like an MLS where I can just list it? Yeah. What does the selling
Eh,
process of an agency look like?
Yeah, I mean, there are websites where you can do that. It's not the best way to go about it. It's kind of like trying to sell your house on your own. But actually business owners are a lot busier than a homeowner, so it's maybe
Mm-hmm.
not the best. So it depends. I mean, everybody approaches it differently. Our process is we take the client through a valuation to educate them on the market value, the marketplace, what a real deal might look like. And so that's always the first process we go through. And, something like half of our clients will work with them for 5 or more years, like updating the valuation every year, something like that. And it's really, for us, it's a chance to educate, a chance to get to know the owner. So we offer that service for free, actually, and walk them through that. But whenever they're ready to go through a process with us in particular, our job is to prep for market and go out and help them introduce them to a variety of buyers in the marketplace, depending on what their objectives are, and help them negotiate and help them work through the transaction process. That's how we handle it. I think a lot of agencies, they end up selling to people they know. Maybe, like I know lots of agents right now are just getting bombarded every week with emails from buyer groups, and so they may step into it haphazardly where someone reaches out to them, and next thing you know, they're a couple months into due diligence and everything. So, the preferred way though is to just get educated first, get organized. Actually, yesterday I did a webinar for the PIA on perpetuation planning, and that's what I talked about is, preparing in advance, assessing the agency, like starting maybe 5 years out from when you want to sell. Because going through that process, you'll get educated. It'll identify things that might need to be cleaned up or opportunities to increase the market value. And so it's always, the preferred path is always getting in front of it, getting prepared, and being educated versus, responding to a buyer that picks up the phone and calls you.
All right. Okay. So super interesting point. I didn't even think of that. Um, yes, I can absolutely see how, with the M&A market being what it is in our industry, how active it has been, I can totally see. I mean, I get calls about we want to buy your business, and like, I run 2 businesses: Insurance Nerds, which before this year never really made any money or not much, and a 2-year-old recruiting firm whose entire business model is me. Right? I don't think there's much to sell, even though like the recruiting business brings in good money. Like, the business model could be summarized to: we want to work with Tony.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I'm not building it to sell it, right? I will die at the desk. Okay. So yes, on the agency side, I'm sure that they definitely get lots of calls. So I'm surprised about the long relationship. I'm surprised about the 5 years. Okay, so generally the preferred way to do this is bring you in to give us a free valuation, and then will you, like, if I had to guess, most of the time you give them the valuation, and grandpa goes, this is not what I imagined. This is right. Like I very much assumed that this asset was worth, I don't know. I've heard from my friends that from the big eye that they sold that, 9 times EBITDA, or whatever, right? Nine times revenue. Uh,
Right.
so I'm assuming that you see a lot of like, they think it's worth more than it is. And number two, the second part of the question, uh, can you help us increase that value, and how?
So number one, everybody's different. So we go through the valuation, and we usually ask them after we do it, was it in the range of what they expected? And we get answers all over the place. So Sometimes, yes, they hear an EBITDA multiple and they think it's a revenue multiple, like, 6, 7, 8, 9 times revenue. There's enough information out there where that is less common than it used to be, but it still does happen. And certainly, what a business is worth to an owner is sometimes more than what it's worth to somebody else, just because, there's a lower risk.
1000%.
It's their source of income. It's a lower risk for them than somebody coming in and buying it. But the multiples are really high. Second question is, yeah, I mean, that's opportunities to increase the value. I mean, that's one of the objectives of us wanting to get in front of people is, let's take a look under the covers. Let's see where, maybe the expenses are high. Maybe they've got relationship issues with producers or networks or something like that that we can help get in front of. One of the most obvious ones is if somebody's organized as a C corporation where you want to convert to an S, because C corps have a double taxation. So if you sell an agency that's owned by a C corp, unless you have a good tax strategy, you're going to be paying double taxes, which ends up being over 50% of the sale price, which is generally a pretty big hurdle to get over
No
to make
kidding.
somebody do that. So there's a lot of things. Every agency we come across, there's different nuances of it. We always joke like nothing's ever easy. Like we'll get into something and what seems like a simple business, the data's bad or there's other issues. So that's our objective is get in front early, educate, and try to help people maximize the value of their business through either working with them over time and helping them fix things, or just through our process of helping them go to market and negotiate the best terms with the right buyers.
So increasing the value, is it um, going to be expensive, or is it just kind of moving things to the right places, redoing contracts? Like for most of the clients, do they have to invest in a bunch of technology? Do they have to invest in a bunch of stuff that they haven't in the past in order to get the value to where it needs to be, or is it all over the place?
It's a variety of things. So we identified. So this was actually in the presentation I went through. There's 4 main issues we run into all the time. One is the agency is too dependent on the owner, meaning usually it's the owner's a key producer, or just the owner doesn't have any other type of administrative people, and so all the controls are in their hands. The challenge with that is when you go to sell, the buyer's going to want you to stay involved for an extended period of time, because then they have to figure out how to transition the management in those relationships.
Real quick pause. Okay, so based on what I've heard and what I've seen, a 2-year buyout period seems to be standard. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It depends on the agency. So that's what
Okay.
like a personal lines agency, the owner, for the most part, the owner can extract themselves in a short period of time from working with a buyer that is already in that business. But commercial agencies, benefits agencies, the owners are usually integral to the client relationships, and that's where it gets a little trickier. Most of the large buyers, a couple of years ago, they were just setting up the deal where you get paid a lump sum at closing, and then there's what's called an earnout. So they're incentivizing the owner to stay on for a couple of years and help grow the business, and then you get another payout at the back end. Now, a lot of the big private equity firms are pushing equity so that the owner stays on as a shareholder. And it's really, handcuffs, just keep them involved because that's going to maintain the business better. But again, the more that the agency owner can do to extract themselves before they get to that point of selling, the easier it's going to be for them to convince the buyer that they're not needed long-term. So owner dependence was number 1. Number 2 is, a lack of growth in the agency. Everybody's revenues are growing right now because the premiums are shooting up, but you roll back more than 5 years ago, flat was pretty common, or 10 years ago, actually, flat revenues was pretty common. But to maximize the value, you want to show growth. One of the components is growth and profitability. And so We don't offer that consulting, but we try to partner with other companies that do maybe strategy consulting, marketing consulting, helping them figure out how they can grow. So number one, owner dependence. Number two is no growth. Three is sometimes they'll see a bad business model. They're chasing the wrong type of customer, so they're just churning business. A good example. Well, there was you'll like this one. There was an insurtech that I looked at a number of years ago. 9 million of revenue, so good size, and negative 3 million of EBITDA, I think. And it was because they were writing auto shoppers that the leads they generated online. So their retention was like 50%. And so all they were doing was churning. And they could never, no matter how much they scale it, are going to get to profitability. So that's a bad business model. It's never going to work. I think the hope is you write enough business and some of it'll stick and you'll eventually get to profitability, but it's just a bad business model. And then the other one is easier to fix. It's just what I call bad sales management. The management system is not being utilized properly, so the data is not getting put in there. Producer relationships are messy. Maybe you've got multiple types of agreements with different producers, or there's no written agreement, and bad financials, like the accounting is bad. So some of those things are easier to fix, but if you've got bad data in your systems, or you got bad accounting, or you have messy producer relationships, and you enter into a sale without fixing those things, it's a problem. You've got to be able to generate the data that supports the financials. The buyer's not going to want to take on messy producer relationships. They've got to be cleaned up. So again, the earlier that someone gets in front of fixing the issues, the smoother their sale process will actually go on the back end.
All the problems you described make perfect sense. They all are endemic, or at the very least common.
They're very common, yes.
Exactly, they're very, very common. So I can see that. I'm curious. So step one is giving you a call for evaluation, but I'm curious if there's a step zero. What I was wondering mostly is especially if the agency is largely is largely like owner dependent, should I first read the E-Myth Revisited and like work at abstracting myself out of the agency and then call you in, or like go ahead and call you in and guide me?
That's a great question. So I actually did a 2-part webinar for the PIA. The first one was building long-term value in your agency. And ironically, you say E-Myth, but I've read that book. And so one of the slides was kind of like self-identify what type of agency you owner you are. And you remember from the E-Myth, it's the technician and all those. So I actually incorporated that into the discussion, because that webinar was focused on first setting your mindset, understanding the obstacles to growing the business, one of which is you having to level up your skills and your focus and all that. And then the other part was on, the core of running a successful business strategy, systems, finances, and then culture of the business. So educating is a good way to start, because when you go into the valuation, if you're just starting off, or if you're really just not necessarily you're not coming down that 5 to 10 year window, get educated. I can probably provide, actually, I have a link for that webinar that I did on building long-term value, but getting educated, looking for the resources to understand what you have to do to scale it and build something that is scalable and of value. So yeah, there's a lot of resources out there too, though.
Fantastic. All right. So looking at the website, which I love to do, okay, build value, exit right. But great tagline, like on the
ABCs, the ABC of owning a business: build value, exit right.
Okay. 2,000 plus formal agency evaluations completed. So that is a lot. That's freaking like 8% of the agencies in the country. 400 plus completed agency M&A transactions, 20 plus 20,000 plus buyers in the ABC Insider Network. What is the ABC Insider Network?
That's our monthly newsletter that goes out. So we have email. We've cleaned it down, so it's maybe 18,000 now, but we've got 18,000 principals around the country that get our monthly newsletter. And I stopped counting how many valuations we've done. It's over 2,000. And I think the actual number of transactions is probably closer to 500. But, we've done, where we represented the seller, we've done over 300. And then the balance of that is we're advising buyers through due diligence on transactions. So we've done a lot. I've seen a lot.
That's a very good point. We've talked mostly from the perspective of the seller. So what if it's the other way around? What if I am, whether it's an agent that wants to buy other books or private equity or whatever, like some pool of money that wants to buy an insurance agency, how can you guys help us?
So first off, they can sign up for our newsletter because that's where we announce the different opportunities that we're promoting. We get calls a lot from, the call that we laugh about is when people say, I've got this great idea, I'm going to go roll up agencies, as if it's a novel idea and it hasn't been done for 50 years. It's really competitive in the marketplace. As everybody knows, there's just a lot of cash. There's a lot of buyers chasing deals. So first is you can join our newsletter, see the opportunities we have. I mean, if someone has never done an acquisition, they really should get counsel when they're going through that process. So we provide due diligence support. We provide valuation support. We've got a couple that we're working on right now, but I've heard horror stories where people buy agencies and all they got from the owner was a tax return and like a P&L, and it's like you have no idea what's in that book of business. And and that was the case. They didn't know what they bought until after the deal closed, and they were surprised by it. So
probably not positively surprised.
Yeah, no, stressed.
All right. Okay. What is the pricing model like? So, right, going back to the real estate agent metaphor at the beginning, do you guys get 7% from the seller, or how do you if the valuation is free, how do you guys get paid?
Yeah, we get paid when our clients get paid from a transaction, and it depends on the size of the transaction, but so it's a percentage of what our clients receive, but it depends on the size of the deal. The bigger the deal, the smaller the percentage. Some firms charge retainers. We don't charge retainers. We don't charge breakup fees. It's, we want a successful transaction. We want our client to get paid, and then when they're happy, that's when we get paid.
Fantastic. How did you end up in this business? How did like, I have no idea how many such consultants there are, but it looks, your LinkedIn. So I always look at the LinkedIn to get an idea of where people come from. So your LinkedIn basically looks like you graduated out of college and went right into M&A, and now you've been doing this for 16 years. So what's kind of the origin story?
So I'll go all the way back. My dad was a physicist. My mom was in real estate banking and then business brokerage. You see my LinkedIn, my degrees are in chemical engineering, if you can see that on there. Towards the end of working on a PhD, I started talking to my mom, who was working in business brokerage, and I realized that people had always told me, "What are you doing? You're not an engineer. Like, you got too much personality." So my mom was a sales trainer, salesperson. I grew up around her and, listening to motivational stuff. So long story short, I followed her and I started working with my mom probably in 2006. And then she passed away, and I partnered with the gentleman who she was working with, and probably, I think 2007 is the first time we stumbled into the insurance industry. basically a client that we had. His brother owned an agency. This was like the bottom of the economy, you know, after the financial meltdown. Um, we represented him through a sale. We found there was interest. We found a private lender that would finance it, and I also found out that there wasn't really anybody in the state of Florida that anybody in the industry respected doing what we do. And so it's kind of an opportunity. But since then, I've got I've got PNC and life and health license. I actually owned an agency for a period of time while doing this, just so I could get my feet wet. So, you know, I've been doing it since 2007, and we've done a lot of work. Now we're, you know, working on a national basis, and so it's been fun.
Love that. That's a fantastic story. I love the fact that at some point, well, I love the fact that you followed your mom into the business, and that at some point you got licensed.
Yeah.
How long did you run your own agency for?
3 or 4 years.
And did you have a good exit from it?
Yeah, I did. So long story short, I mean, I ended up owning an Allstate just because the opportunity came up, and um, but the challenge was, as anybody who worked for Allstate knows, they require you to get securities license, and I couldn't do that because I worked in M&A, and that's also securities regulated.
Oh,
I couldn't do both, so I just ended up selling the agency.
okay, got it, got it. But yeah, that's awesome that you've actually sat in the seat. You've actually ran an agency, even though it was exclusive.
I
Uh,
was working 70-hour weeks probably between both, running
uh,
both businesses.
my grandpa, Tony the Second, had a PhD in physics, and so I've now met two PhDs in physics that actually like ended up being business successful. Let's call it.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, you took me down memory lane. I was at some point in my life just before college. He sat me down and said, I have two sets of friends. I have my academic friends who I went to school with and who I respect, none of whom made money. And then I have my business owner friends, who none of them were good students. They were all like C students, and I'm the only one that's a part of both groups. Uh, and basically, he wanted us to follow in his footsteps. We didn't. I'm a crappy student. Okay. But yes, he had a PhD in physics. And the funniest part was he's telling me that story, and like when he told me his academic story and kind of how that went, when he mentioned the PhD in physics, which was the last degree, obviously, he said, everything that I researched during those, I don't know, 3 years I think he spent in Chicago doing that, everything I researched has now been disproven. So anyway, all right.
Do you know who Jack Welch is?
I know he was a chemical engineer, right?
Yeah, right. So
Originally.
he was considered one of the best CEOs of the last century, and he was a PhD chemical engineer.
I didn't. Yes, I've read his book. I think he wrote two, and
Straight from the gut, and something I forget the other one.
I winning.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, so I read Winning early on, either during college or during my MBA. I think during my MBA, and I really liked it. Uh, Today, I actively disagree with a lot of his management style, but at the time, I thought it was very good. And it is so sad that GE is literally no longer listed
Yeah,
in the Dow, right? At least in its
yeah.
original form. Anyway, so
He
yeah,
like increased the market value by like 30x or 20x or something while he was there, and then it tanked after he left.
I'm not a GE expert, but yeah, definitely an interesting topic for sure over a beer at some point. Uh, all right. So I think I asked all my usual questions. Normally I also ask about kind of like integration, but in this is not a tech thing. We talked about pricing. Normally I ask about future features, but again, you guys are not a platform. So anything else
Yeah,
that you would really like the listeners to know about the work that you guys do?
We are working on a new service that we're going to be rolling out soon. So I mentioned the issue of owner dependence. I mean, once a week we'll talk to an agency owner and they're like, I'm always worried, what if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? What am I going to do? Or what's going to happen to the business? So
What am I gonna do?
yeah,
Hopefully
what's
survive.
what's my spouse going to do, or what's going to happen to the business? And it's something that weighs on them to the point where they're always on the fence. Should they sell just to liquidate the asset? So we're rolling out a continuity service that doesn't exist, where we're going to help them have a game plan in place and have information organized. So if something like that does happen, and sadly it does happen, where people, we've got a client right now that died unexpectedly. We're working with his widow on selling the agency, so it does happen. But the service is, we're going to help them get organized. We're going to put a game plan in place. We're going to coordinate with a state attorney. And then every year we're going to update the plan, update evaluation. So that way, if something happens, there's a game plan in place. Information is already organized so that the people that have to step in have everything they need. And, because I've seen firsthand over the last 6 months, a friend actually who owned an agency died unexpectedly, and I've been working with his family to try and get it under control. So we're actually rolling out, to you asked about new services or what new features, and we're actually going to roll out a service where we help solve that problem, because there's nothing in the marketplace to
That
help.
is fantastic. First of all, I'm sorry to hear that, and number two, that is fantastic. I never thought of that, but that makes so much sense. When is it rolling out?
We're working on it. Hopefully in the next 3 months. We're getting close. It's more
Fantastic.
complicated than you think, because we had to talk to a whole bunch of estate attorneys to understand how probate works. And so that was part of our education process.
Fantastic. Once that rolls out, I'd love to have you back on the show for an update and like a
Yeah.
deep dive into what that product looks like.
Okay.
Because yes, just like every income earner that has dependents should have life insurance, and way too many of them don't, or don't have enough, or the right type of life insurance. I'm not life licensed, by the way, but
Even insurance agents are underinsured.
yeah. And yes, every insurance agency principal, unless your spouse, unless your kids are, self-sustaining now, and your spouse happens to also have a great job herself, you owe it to them to not only have life insurance, but to not leave a nightmare behind for them if you die unexpectedly. Because okay, so I'm guessing most of them don't have either, right? Like not enough life insurance, and the business is not set up to be handed over. But also, even if the life insurance is proper, so even if you have enough life insurance that your family is taking care of, if you die unexpectedly, don't leave them the nightmare of having to figure out how to sell this complicated asset,
Yeah.
right as they're mourning your loss, right? So yes, like if markets worked properly, you would sell 30,000 copies of this in the next year.
Right.
Basically, every agency needs this. So thank you for figuring out that this was needed and for doing the work. Looking forward to have you back to talk about that one.
Thank you.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for your time today. I've learned a lot, which is always one of my favorite things about the podcast. And yeah, look forward to have you back for the update once that rolls out.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tony. Good to talk to you.